Today I'm going to do some tests on the Nerf AccuStrike RaptorStrike. Recently Amazon had one of their spring clearing sales, so you could get the brown box version for 20 bucks. I don't usually dabble around too much in spring airs, but at 20 bucks it's a cool looking shell, so I figured why the heck not order a couple. And by now, at this point, since it's been on the market for about 6 months, custom springs are currently available. So you can get it from some of the smaller vendors, you can get them from random ass manufacturers on the web, like this Chinese manufacturer that had 7 kilogram springs and this really heavy 12 kilogram spring that I'm not sure the stock internal will be able to hold. First of all, we need to get a baseline reading. So this is a straight out of box, unmodified, hasn't been cracked open yet. One thing I am going to note, because I have seen the reviews on the initial run, they have taken out the primer indicator. So that's going to make the internals a little bit more simple, but it's also removing one of the features that was kind of cool. You know, you had a little green thing that would show up when you primed it, and that would indicate that it had a dart in the chamber. So loss of functionality is always a little unfortunate. We're going to be testing Nerf brand AccuStrike darts 24. I'm going to put them in the drum just so I don't have to keep reloading the little 6-round magazines. All right, we got that running. And that should be it. So the action on this with the stock spring is really smooth. And what we're getting here, we can stop that. We'll save the group. Check the data. That's 69.8, standard deviation 2, minimum 66, max 73, spread of 7. And if you look at the actual numbers, they're all hovering mostly in the 70, high 60 range, which is keeping accurate with the averages. So that's a little bit higher than some of the initial runs seem to be. So these darts are a little bit heavier than the Elite darts, which is how Hasbro usually does the velocity testing. And because we're getting the same velocity out of these slightly heavier, slightly less aerodynamically sound darts, I'm wondering if Hasbro didn't change OEM spring specs to get a little bit more velocity out of them. So the upside is now out of the box. Even though you use the primer, you lose the primer indicator, you're now getting 70 feet per second using the factory darts out of the box without even having to crack open the shell. The problem is that if they did actually improve the spring, that means that the benefits that you're going to get from doing a minor spring upgrade like the 7 kilogram, it's probably not going to be as pronounced as you would get out of a earlier production, the previous version that was maybe firing in the, I guess what I've seen everything going from the high 50s to the high 60s depending on which version you got. Now I've tested 2 of them, so I can already confirm that both of these were shooting in the they were shooting in the 70s. Okay, this is with the 7 kilogram spring. It's a direct swap replacement. Takes about 5 minutes to do. No other changes to the internals, no removal of additional locks, no lubing of parts, no PTFE tape, nothing. Just, again, takes about 5 minutes to crack open the shell, swap open the spring, and screw it back together again. 24 AccuStrike darts, Nerf brand. Oh, just a side note, most of you already know this, but don't put the other arm on there if you're going to crack the thing open, because you have to pry it open. What I'll probably do is design a piece that allows you to put the other knob on and still remove it, but we'll get to that later after I've done these tests. All right, and I'm just going to say with the 7 kilogram spring, the stroke is a little bit heavier. You can definitely tell it's harder, but it's still pretty smooth. and that's 24. All right, so that's 79.5, standard deviation 2.1, minimum 74, max 83, spread of 9. So you're getting it's 10 feet per second additional from the stock spring. Okay, so taking apart the RaptorStrike, it's pretty straightforward. It's 29 screws, so the only real problem is there are a lot of fasteners holding this long shell together, but there are no clips or anything holding it in place. Pops off pretty easily. The one thing I will note about the shell is due to the length, and most of the length is coming from one piece of plastic, there is a fair amount of flex and wobble. So that is the disadvantage of having a really long piece of plastic that is, you can see how thick it is right here. Now, if you compare this with the shells of the rival blasters, they tend to use thicker plastic. And I'd probably grab right now the calipers and take a look at the thickness there, but I can just tell you from visual inspection and from the amount of flex like that they are using less plastic in the shell for the RaptorStrike blasters. And part of the reason is because right here, take a look at the plunger. This is a pretty small plunger. It's given the size of the shell, which pretty much ends right here. You would think that they would put a larger plunger in there, but the truth is, if they're only shooting for 70 feet per second, there is no need to put a massive plunger in there and fill that massive plunger with a paperclip thin spring. That's just, there would be no reason to over-engineer it like that, even if they know that people are breaking these things open and replacing the springs. So that's the real truth behind why they're using this size plunger. This is all that is required to get 70 feet per second from the factory RaptorStrike darts. And that's pretty much your Scooby-Doo mystery solved right there. In terms of swapping spring out, here. That's it. Okay. Pull that out. Where's that 12 kilogram spring? Yes, I should be mounting this on the tripod, but what I'm showing you is that the ease with which this, I can even open this bag with 12 kilogram spring one-handed. I'm just showing the ease with which this modification can be done. All right. So we just put that in there, put that cap back in, button it up, and then you're done. Okay, so we're back. We've dropped in the 12 kilogram spring. So we now have our A gun with the 7 kilogram spring and the B gun with the 12 kilogram spring. I am going to say that due to the flexibility of the plastic in these, the 12 kilogram spring that did not want to function in the A gun functioned pretty well in the B gun. So that might partly be due to alignment issues. Again, I kind of already noted how the large shell sort of flexes, and that flexibility can interfere with the operation of the mechanism. This one went together much smoother than the A gun, and although there were some teething problems, once the spring settled into the tube, I was able to get it to consistently fire. I am going to note that the 12 kilogram priming stroke is significantly heavier than the 7, and that's really not any kind of surprise. So we've got 24 factory Nerf RaptorStrike darts, and again, 81. Now you really have to make sure that you crack the stroke back hard, otherwise you end up with a partial prime and it sticks in the half position, and then you have to use the jam buttons to coax it back into the fully stroked position. So already with this heavy spring, you're kind of compromising the off-the-shelf smoothness. And looking at these numbers here, you're not really getting, okay, that was 89, 78. So you're seeing there's quite a bit of variation here. And you're hearing a big bang. Okay, that was a 90 feet per second. But big bang still results in 77 feet per second. 89, 85, And there should be one more in there. Oh, I guess not. Maybe one of them didn't register. But all right, so what we have here is 82.7, which is consistent with my first test. Standard deviation 3.9, minimum 75. That was actually the same as well. Max 90. So it's pretty inconsistent. I mean, 15 feet per second is quite a bit of a spread, especially compared to the factory, which was all hovering around the 70 mark. So yeah, I'm not sure how much of that inconsistency is due to a loss in pressure. So if we crack this thing open and we address the PTFE seals and maybe add a little bit of white lithium grease, although the factory grease that's in there I think is fine. I think what I may just do, and it seems almost like a lot of work to crack these open, just to add PTFE tape underneath the O-rings. But if that can even out and I can consistently get 90 feet per second out of the 12 kilogram spring, I'm holding the wrong one. This is why you have to mark these things. If I consistently get 90 feet per second out of the 12 kilogram spring, I don't know if I would necessarily consider that to be worth it. Still kind of swinging towards the 7 kilogram spring, but at least it's usable. A, it's usable, and B, it gives you an additional 10 feet per second. And all I'm going to say about that is when you're starting with the 70 consistent, 10 or 20 feet per second, factory internals, you can kind of decide for yourself whether you want that additional 10 feet per second or that additional up to 20 but wildly inconsistent.